Ever awake at about 4 in the morning? 4, it's about 4 always, right? Yeah, that's a holy hour. I think the early monastic orders got it right when they had their first time of prayer at 4 in the morning. They say it's a holy hour. It's the hour when we are most ready to hear God's voice. Of course, we think that we're anonymous, that we don't count, that God may not be communicating with us. God is always trying to communicate with us. Are we always listening? We have here in the story of Samuel, God communicating with the boy as a boy. We have God communicating with Nathaniel. And how does Nathaniel realize that it's God? It's because he realizes that God has seen him even before he has seen God's in the flesh representative on earth, Jesus Christ, God incarnate. When I was little, I used to hear that story about Samuel, and I just so desperately wanted God to call me in the middle of the night. I was really hoping for it, praying for it. I didn't realize that I had to be still enough to listen. And I thought, oh, well, it was a boy. You know, boys are the ones that get written about a whole lot more in the Bible than girls, right? You ladies know this. But, you know, every word written for the boys is written for the girls, too. And I realized that, as I have grown, that none of us are anonymous to God. None of us are anonymous. We may think we are. We may think that God is not paying attention. We may think that God is just, maybe 2 blocks over or down the street or in another country or at another church, and God is not paying to us attention here and now. But that's not true. It may be more that we haven't been paying attention to God. The curious thing about the way the lectionary works is that it ties the scriptures together from the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, the Psalms, an epistle, a letter to the church, the new church at large, usually by Paul, because he was the most prolific writer, and then a gospel. But the psalm for today, is the one that pulls all of these scriptures together. The psalm is 139. Oh God, investigate my life. Get all the facts firsthand. I'm an open book to you, even from a distance. You know what I'm thinking. You know when I leave and when I get back. I'm never out of your sight. You know everything I'm going to say before I start the first sentence. I look behind me, and you're there. I think that's that 2020 vision we have when we look at some disaster or some wonderful thing that's happened in our life and see the hand of God in it. I look behind me and you're there, and then up ahead, you're there too, your reassuring presence coming and going. This is too much, too wonderful. I can't take it all in. Is there any place I can go to avoid your spirit, to be out of your sight? If I climb to the sky, you're there. If I go underground, you're there. If I flew on morning's wings to the far western horizon, in other words, as far away from the rising sun as possible, You'd find me in a minute. You're already there waiting. Then I said to myself, oh, he even sees me in the dark. Think of that 4 a.m. awakening. At night, I'm immersed in the light. It's a fact. Darkness isn't dark to you. Night and day, darkness and light, they're all the same to you. Oh, yes, you shaped me first inside and then out. You formed me in my mother's womb. I thank you, high God. You're breathtaking. Body and soul, I'm marvelously made. I worship in adoration. What a creation. You know me inside and out. You know every bone in my body. You know exactly how I was made bit by bit, how I was sculpted from nothing into something. Like an open book, you watched me grow from conception to birth. All the stages of my life were spread out before you. All the days of my life, all prepared before I'd even lived one day. Your thoughts, how rare, how beautiful, God. I'll never comprehend them. I couldn't even begin to count them any more than I could count the sand of the sea. Oh, let me rise in the morning and live always with you. That may or may not be our personal prayer. Sometimes we want to hide from God. We want to hide the things we fear. We want to hide because we're afraid that God may actually ask more of us than we are willing to give. But I am here to tell you, friends, you can't hide. You may want to be anonymous, but it's not possible. God is there always seeking and finding. God is there with you always. As the Apostle Paul assures us, in life and death we belong to God. There is nothing that can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus. So as much as we may try to be anonymous, as much as we may try to hide, as much as we may think that whatever we're doing is not in God's sight, it is. William, it is, even for you. Even for you. Now, Nathanael brings us to a point. Can any good come out of Nazareth? Oh, you've got to be kidding. Let's change that around a little bit. Can anything good come out of Iola, Kansas? Nazareth was this little tiny, sort of a backwater town. Now, I know that Thrive Allen County has done a lot to put Iola on the map, but nevertheless, compared to the cities of Kansas, Iola is a few stoplights. It is. Can anything good come out of Iola? And I am here to tell you absolutely yes, because God is calling you to do your very best, to be the very best of who God created you to be. And you are not anonymous. What you do, especially what you do with God consciousness, matters. What you do without God's consciousness matters too, and God knows about it. Now, does God condemn you? No. God is always tugging at you, trying to pull you in God's direction. But whatever it is, whatever God is calling you to do, you cannot run, you cannot hide, You cannot be anonymous. I was a student in Europe a long time ago in a galaxy far away. When I was in college and as a junior, I lived in Switzerland for almost 10 months. I was studying French. I got pretty good at it. That was a good thing. And while being there a longer time, I thought that maybe I would eventually blend in. But you know, Americans, wherever they are, just sort of stick out like sore thumbs. The problem is that they don't always recognize it. I remember being embarrassed sometimes meeting other Americans. They thought that they were there and they were in a place where no one would recognize them. No one would know them, and so their behavior was, shall I say, a little bit off the rails. They thought they were going to be anonymous. I saw. Others saw too. And what we need now in this country more than ever is to know that people are watching around the world. God is watching too, and God will call us to account. We are to be witnesses of God in the world, and anytime someone is standing and making statements that do not reflect the love and grace and glory of God, then it is up to us to stand and say, that is not the God I worship and serve. We cannot be anonymous. Our God did not make us to be anonymous. It's not always easy, but perhaps in this day, in this time, we are being called to stand for the good, the lovely, the just, the true, the merciful, the good. May God give us the strength and courage, because remember, God knit us together in our mother's womb. God has known us from before the beginning, and nothing can separate us from God's love. And to God be the glory. Amen.